And we're live. Hello and welcome to another episode. I guess we're co-streaming this. I'm Maddie Allin with Adam Stokes.
G'day, Maddie, and g'day, everyone. Great to be here.
So, yeah, you and I have done a lot of interviews over the years in crypto, talking about Bitcoin and also altcoins as well. So, yeah, really excited to catch up with you tonight.
Yeah, your timing was very good because, of course, we've been waiting for everyone in the crypto land to see success against the SEC, not just Richard Hart, but of course Brian Armstrong, other crypto platforms and currency creators. We still have some more work to do with the SEC, but most certainly because we have a crypto-friendly government over the United States, we can see this pivot point, this significant pivot point where we're moving from us against the world. And when I say us, I mean all crypto goers against the rest of the world being the old financial entrenched systems of the past, moving on to not just Web3, but true ownership of your wealth, true freedom of speech, freedom of association. Because I guess the fundamental, the layer one to all freedom is the freedom to hold your money and not have your money eroded. Now, let's be honest, Maddie. Within our crypto tribes, we have within our crypto tribes rather, we have different paradigms or perspectives or theories on how this will play out and how the future of money will be. But I think where we can all come together, where we all have consensus within the crypto land, is that we understand that fiat is the Ponzi scheme. Crypto is not the scam. The dollar, the rupee, the pound, the euro, it's all a scam. Fiat that's printed without limit, controlled by someone at the top, whether it's a government, a deep state, I don't know, whether it's the bankers, whether it's a little bit of all of it. What we want to do is we want to break away from these old financial systems and move into the new space. What we're trying to do in the crypto land, of course, is figure out, well, which coin is it going to be? Is it going to be my coin or your coin or one coin or many coins? And I just hope as we move forward together, that we recognize that it's not the crypto tribes against each other. If there is competition, if there is friction, if there is war, it shouldn't be amongst ourselves. It should be against the old broken financial systems.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to get crypto people to get along, and that's why the White House, they had planned putting together a crypto advisory council, and what they discovered was that there was so much infighting that now they're going to be doing like a number of different summits where they can have different groups come through and advise the president and help shape the policy and whatnot. So yeah, it's interesting how this administration had to adapt once they saw the realities of these different crypto tribes.
I hadn't heard that, but it kind of makes sense because, of course, we heard before the presidential election or the actual day, that 20th of November, that Bitcoin was going to be the strategic reserve. America was going to be Bitcoin friendly. They were going to be the Bitcoin capital. And then, of course, within the first month, we're like, well, where's our strategic reserve? But it sounds like what you're saying is that as these advisors come into the White House, they've got their own tribes and their own paradigms, their own perhaps interests. When you look at maybe Garlinghouse lobbying the government to say, well, let's use XRP, where you've got Bitcoin maxi saying, no, just stick with Bitcoin. And then when you've got all the ISO 20022 compliant and American-made coins, whether it's HBAR, AVAX, Cardano, and so forth, someone's got to make a decision. So have you got any insight of when this decision could be coming?
So I know that there's something happening later. I guess it's about a week from now. Maybe around March 9th, there's going to be some announcement they're saying about maybe a Bitcoin strategic reserve. There's supposed to be an event at the White House that's coming up, I think in about a week. And so, we might start to find out pretty soon here what's happening. I had been following David Sachs, who's the new crypto czar.
Wow.
I've been following him since 222 weeks ago, because he started his weekly podcast, the same week that I did. I started doing mine just coincidentally, and he called his All In, right? And so
I just
I'm
made
like,
that connection now. Yeah.
I'm Googling my own show to like see what comes up, and these guys come up, the All In podcast. I end up going to some of their conferences over the years. This past year, I brought the Hex DeLorean, the car you can see in my background. I brought that to the All-In Summit because they were having a Back to the Future party, coincidentally again, and so they let me bring it out there and show it off. And then just recently at a Christmas party, I quickly got to introduce myself to David Sachs, um, like a few days after it was announced that he was going to be named the crypto czar, and he was wearing a Russian hat. To
Hang on, so
like
you got to meet
poke
Sachs,
fun at.
did you?
Yeah.
What? You're always meeting these high rollers. How are you doing this?
Luck.
I've brought up a picture of Sachs out there. So I've been watching, not as long as you, but I'm watching the All In podcast for some time. And it's a really good podcast. And when I actually found out that Sachs was going to be the crypto czar, it's like, oh, excellent, because everyone within that All In podcast seemed very friendly to crypto. But maybe he was nervous on the first day, but I remember when I first saw him in the White House for a press conference, he didn't speak so well, and maybe he's a little bit
Right.
overwhelmed. He's standing next to the president. There's cameras at his face. He hasn't been in this situation before. But from what you're tracking, what do you think? Is there going to be Bitcoin as the strategic reserve in the United States, or is there going to be a basket of cryptocurrencies?
I think it'll be a basket because just looking at his bags, to be blunt, like, just knowing what he holds, it's, a lot of what he was early on Solana. And I mean, we're talking like, I don't know, a penny or something that a bunch of these VC guys got to buy Solana for. And then David Sachs was also early to Bitcoin. So I think those are two safe bets when it comes to like what could be in the strategic reserve. And then you have Trump's World Liberty Financial launching a meme, or like, I don't know if it's actually that company per se, but like Trump's meme coin launched on Solana, and then they took $400 million of that and bought Ethereum. And so that's another one that seems to be like, favored in the crypto basket.
Yeah, we've been talking about Solana. If you take away all the meme coins on Solana, what value does it really have? Now, of course, there's a Solana tribe, there's a Pulse tribe, there's an Ethereum tribe, and even a Cardano tribe. And we look at what's going to be the smart coin of the future. But it seems that I remember a while ago where I was watching Raoul Pal speak. This was years and years ago. And he was talking about all of these high level projects. And then he went on just to the macro, and he was talking about no crypto project in particular, but just the macro. And then he weaved Solana into the conversation. And it just really struck me. It didn't seem logical that Solana would be spoken about at that time. And I couldn't help to wonder that, well, maybe Solana is very VC heavy. That is, a lot of venture capital has been invested into this platform. And therefore, the big VC boys need a lot of promotion and they need to plug this coin. But at the end of the day, I mean, let's face it, Solana is doing exceptionally well, currently ranked at number 6 with a market cap of 72 billion and a 24-hour volume, even in relatively quiet times, of $3 billion. But in your mind, Maddie, if we took away meme coins, would Solana even have any strength? Would it exist? Do we need it?
I think that they've figured out like the user interface better than other cryptos. I mean, if you can even call Solana a crypto, but yeah, I think in terms of like, an investment, people have done well. I kind of faded it last cycle, and now I see like how popular it is. But they've got a lot of unlocks coming out, like billions and billions of dollars, which is part of the reason why I think we saw all the blowups, that were occurring on Solana meme coins, and why everything has fallen apart in the past couple weeks is because now that we're getting into March, you're going to see billions of dollars of VC unlocks, and the insiders were trying to front run the last blow off top that they could have.
Yeah, it's concerning to me that maximum supply, of course, being infinity, the total supply at the moment, 595 million. I recall in my very early days in crypto, I've been around since pre-Ethereum, and when Ethereum was coming out, why
Mm,
I didn't really get into it is because at the time, I'm heavily into it now, but at the time I really didn't like that infinity symbol. That is a maximum supply of infinity.
mm-hmm.
Um, Now, of course, in hindsight, you can see that Ethereum's done pretty well in controlling that supply, but back then we had never seen this before. We didn't really understand what a smart contract coin was, and when it came to a maximum supply of infinity in the Bitcoin paradigm, you say, well, hang on, why would I adopt a coin that has a supply of infinity when that's what we're trying to break up with when it comes to fiat? Fiat has a supply of unlimited, and so does Ethereum, and so does Solana.
Right.
And you raise a good point, because when those unlocks do come into the Solana ecosystem, and we move away potentially from the meme mania, because we saw the NFT mania, we saw
Mm-hmm.
the Bitcoin. Let's go through the timeline. You had the better Bitcoin, so Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Black, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin's everything. Then you had the better Ethereum, the Ethereum killer, and then you had the NFT phase. Now we've gone through the meme coin phase. I think we're going to go through the real world asset phase and the artificial intelligence phase. So I really wonder that when you have those unlocks for Solana and the hype around meme coins back off a little bit, perhaps we're going to see Solana tumble down the charts. Your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, I think it looks pretty bad for Solana.
When do I sell though? I'm thinking, like, I've got big bags of Solana. I was buying it around the $20 or $30 mark,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, but I'm wondering, because the top here is the all-time high. We can see. I'll just go down to the exact stats here. The all-time high for Solana, at according to this data set, was around the 250-ish mark, a bit over $250. Just go to 3 months here to get a little bit more granular.
I think it
Um,
traded at 300 almost.
okay,
Like people who were waiting to sell at 300 never saw it, but it would get up to like 295, I think.
yeah, on this data set, I've got 284, but yeah, I can concur that's not much of a delta. I was hoping to see Solana go to $1,000 this cycle. But equally, I was hoping to see Ethereum go to $10,000 last cycle. So there's the eternal question that we're all asking ourselves in the crypto land: do we sell our Solana to buy Ethereum, or the other way around? Dump your Ethereum to get Solana? Or maybe this is a nice segue into your world, my friend. Do you dump the whole lot and go into Pulse? So we can see Pulse is actually down 13.9% for the day, but over the last 7 days, also down 4.23%. Incentive seems to be doing the best after the news with Richard Hart and the SEC dismissing the case, not just against Richard Hart, but against other cryptocurrency platforms as well, including Coinbase. What's happening with Pulse? We're still at 0.42 rather sacrifice. So we're those who sacrifice to Pulse aren't even holding half of what they sacrificed. Noting that there was an amplifier if you got in early, but keeping all things consistent. People are getting a little bit scared, frustrated, not just in the RH ecosystem, but across the entire board. How are you feeling about Pulse compared to Ethereum or Solana?
I am all in on the tickers that you see on the screen here. Even though I've typically through different parts of the cycle held, a lot of Ethereum, never really held Solana much. And so I mean, yeah, like I have, maybe I have 10% in fiat and 10% of my, net worth in Bitcoin, and the rest is these tickers. And, they're doing very well compared to their all-time lows. There's a button to the top right there for that. And I also think that I mean, yeah, you really have to understand like what's been holding this ecosystem back. First of all, was this SEC case that we got a resolution on yesterday, and everything pumped like 50 to 70% yesterday, and it got sold off quickly. But that's really good news that I can tell you the market hasn't even really finished digesting yet. Out of maybe 7 companies or cryptos that we heard of recently that got a quote unquote dismissal of their SEC case, that was the SEC backing off. The Richard Hart case was won in court. It had nothing to do with politics. It was like it was a decisive victory in court that was decided by a judge, not just, the president's new team came in and did something. So that's more of, I think, more of a glorious outcome. And also, I would predict that this is like one of the first points that people are going to see in something you might call an RH, a Richard Hart comeback arc, or a redemption arc, as it's called.
So hang on, you actually raised a good point there. So it's not that the new crypto SEC, correction, the new crypto friendly SEC came in and the crypto czar said, or the new head of the SEC came in and said, no, we're dropping our cases. It actually did go to trial, at least started to go to trial. And then the judge said, no, based on what I can see here, I'm dismissing it. So that's
Yeah,
actually a victory.
yeah. I went with like over 100, maybe it was 150 other Hexicans. I went to the court date, and even though we didn't have to, we went and packed the courtroom in Brooklyn, New York.
You were there.
On Yeah, I was there on
Oh, tell
Halloween
me more.
day. I
Okay.
was there on Halloween day, and I got to meet Richard's lawyers, who are also Elon Musk's lawyers.
Was Richard
Uh,
there?
Richard was not there, and
Have,
yeah,
sorry,
um,
go on.
yeah, yeah.
Tell me
So,
all the details.
so I mean, like, the judge is sitting there, like, grilling the SEC, like, where does the blockchain live? Right? Like, that's a famous quote that we got out of that, because they're trying to establish jurisdiction, which Richard had already thought 20 steps ahead of everything to make sure that he could do things legally. Like, Richard did everything legally, and there's been 2 years where the community had to put up with like government harassment. I was subpoenaed as a witness in the SEC case, and my bank debanked me because of that. They did that illegally as a part of Operation Choke Point 2.0. And so, like, if that happened to me, think of all the people who got scared off, and didn't keep going like I did, doing a live stream twice a week since before all this started. So yeah, like, going into the courtroom and seeing the judge, like, now that was 3 or 4 months ago now. So since then we've just been waiting and just having to go off of what her reaction was during that like hour and 15 minute or hour and a half session.
That it says here. So I hadn't known that you were personally so involved in it, especially that you actually went to the court case. But the key
Oh yeah.
takeaways here says the court dismisses the SEC's lawsuit against Richard Hart due to lack of personal jurisdiction. The SEC failed to prove that Hart's crypto transactions qualified as domestic under US securities law. So allow me to play devil's advocate here. So if the United States has dismissed it, does that mean that another jurisdiction is going to try it? Or does it come back to that case of where does the blockchain live? There is no jurisdiction over cyberspace per se.
That's a great question that I'll ask like one of the YouTubers in our community who is a brilliant legal mind, known as Nuclear Herbs. He like is the first one to be able to explain everything to those of us who have not actually studied law formally. And so that's something I'll ask him in my live stream tomorrow, is like, yeah, what is the jurisdiction of Finland going to do?
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like a decisive victory, the judge even put in her 31-page ruling for dismissing the case. She basically said, even if there was jurisdiction, the fraud claims don't hold.
Right. So
So
does Richard,
that's a big deal.
does he then get costs awarded to him?
I'm not sure.
Did they mention that in the courtroom? Because basically the SEC's come forward with the case, they lost. Therefore, typically whoever loses has to pay the other person's legal fees. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and I
I
don't know, but that's the first thing I'd be going for if I was Richard.
like that may or may not be the case, but like the best way to think about legal circumstances is that like the process is the punishment. So even if
Yeah,
you're not guilty, like having 2 years of everybody saying, "Ha ha, we knew, we knew Hex was a scam," when in reality, a way that smart people are going to start interpreting everything is that Richard planned from before Hex even launched to do everything legally. Now that's been justified by the highest court of law, for just a regular federal court, and basically even the outrage marketing, I think, which a lot of us didn't agree with at the time, stopped people from buying the top of Hex. Hex was already up 10,000x. If Hex had gone up 100,000x, then it still would have fallen 99% in a bear market and people would have been that worse off. So I think that outrage marketing actually served like a really important purpose to protect people from buying the top up even higher and kind of put a damper on the ecosystem at the time, which was kind of needed. So Hex was almost too good in its first cycle to where now that has like threatened its performance in its second cycle. And so, yeah, like there's different ways to interpret some of these things.
it's funny because in preparation for this discussion today, I was thinking years ago I made a documentary on Bitcoin. And I spoke about the eternal battle or the massive battle that lays ahead for all of us, not just Bitcoin, but for everyone. And there's going to be endless battles, not because we're doing anything wrong, but because we're competing with the entrenched financial systems. If you've got an ability to have a monopoly or be part of an oligopoly or a cartel over all financial systems, whether it's printing money, storing money, blocking, seizing, monitoring money, and then a new system comes in, whether it's your coin or my coin or any coin, there's ultimately going to be pushback. Now, the pushback, of course, that we've seen with in many instances, it was like, oh, you're all scammers, you're on Silk Road, you're selling drugs, you're terrorists, all the stuff that they threw at us. Then once we got past all of that in the crypto timeline, it seems that the next battle was, it's not real, I can't touch it, it's just fake, funny money, Peter Schiff's paradigm, if it's not gold and I can't make jewelry and electronics out of it and I can't touch it, it has no value. Then we go on to the next phase where we can see you now have legal battles of the SEC, in my opinion, protecting the old corrupt centralized financial systems.
Yeah.
But then, as we've discussed here with this judge making this finding, it is spectacular because it's for all the viewers out there, because we're dual live streaming at the moment. So for the viewers out there, I'm streaming this on my channel. Maddie's hosting this, but he's streaming on his channel as well. And the reason why I'm keen to talk about this is because it's another example of no matter which crypto tribe you're in, we're all going to face battles here. We're going to face battles from perception, from the friends that call us and say, oh, I heard crypto's down this week, or crypto's a scam. Oh, I heard Richard Hart's been charged with whatever. And it's just relentless. And so even though I'm not a fan, as an example, of XRP, when XRP had its little battles, it's like, well, that's kind of my cousin. They're in the crypto land. They're battling this
Yeah.
out. So a win for them is a win for us. And the same is here with Hex. Now, I just want to, if you don't mind, just read what Richard said here. He said, quote, I appreciate Judge Amon's careful ruling, which has dismissed all of the SEC's claims against me. This type of victory over the SEC is quite rare. Pulse Chain, PulseX, and Hex are not securities and should be allowed to flourish. Hex has operated flawlessly for over 5 years, said Hart in a statement following the court's ruling. So just to confirm, I need to get some more information from you because I'm streaming live tonight on the Sunday Summary. Everyone join me in a couple of hours if you want to go into the broader crypto space. But so I can understand, after this comment here from Richard Hart, does that mean there are no more court cases against him or Hex or Pulse anywhere in the world at the moment? Or is that Finland red notice still floating around? What's going on?
Yeah, so there's a corrupt Finland red notice with Interpol that was put out, and of course Richard Hart made it into a meme coin called Most Wanted.
Oh, that's what most is about.
Right.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
yeah, so that's kind of funny, and it's got his like mugshot as like the JPEG for the coin. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, like just like with this SEC case, it was corrupt and it was untrue, and it took a long time for the truth to get proven in these like archaic systems. So that's probably the same thing that's going to happen in Finland. It like I don't think anybody would bet that somebody who's like a crypto billionaire who had the best lawyers in the world helping him with the SEC thing, that they're not going to help, that there's not going to be a similar legal team in Europe that, isn't going to help him there too. So, I think that truth will come out eventually. But yeah, there's like questions of taxes and like, punching somebody is like on the list.
Oh, I
But,
forgot about that. Yeah.
but yeah, like that to me seems as baseless as this SEC thing. And then there's a really funny one in South Carolina. There's a class action lawsuit against Hex, where there's like this hot dog vendor that lost like $1,000 in Hex, and he's trying to sue, and there are Hexicans stepping up there and you know trying to get the record straight.
You know, it seems, and this is going to trigger some people. Hex and XRP are two completely different coins. Two completely different coins, but I just keep seeing correlations. When allow me to explain before the audience types. It's not the same. Listen, step back, everyone, relax. The Hex community is immensely strong. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. There is no other community like the Hex community. But the same may be true when it comes to, even though I'm about to contradict what I said, saying there's no other community like the Hex community. The XRP army is very strong in itself. And then you can see both XRP or Ripple and Hex and Richard Hart were both under attack from the SEC. Then you can also see these weird court cases, because when you said that about the hot dog vendor making a claim, something happened with XRP that was similar. Someone lost, I think, $500 on XRP, as in it didn't perform as well as they had hoped it would perform, and they too launched a legal case against Ripple because XRP didn't perform as they wanted it to. So I keep seeing these correlations between the XRP army and the Hexicans, where they are strong, they are united, they believe in their coin. They're going up against frivolous lawsuits against the SEC. They're also going up against random lawsuits where some hot dog vendor or equivalent put a few $100 in and is not a millionaire, so now they want to sue.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on, before I get back into the legal cases with Hex, because I want to get a little bit more insight of what happened in the courtroom. In your mind, you're American, you're right up at the top here with everything that's happening. Will XRP, noting that Garlinghouse is putting a lot of pressure, well, not pressure, he's lobbying the government, and allegedly there's hundreds of millions of dollars going towards Trump from XRP or from Ripple. What are your thoughts on XRP? Will it be adopted as the standard for moving money and value around the world? And is there any possibility as well, part B to that, of XRP being adopted as a strategic reserve?
Yeah, I think it'll be a strategic reserve because they're so well connected in Washington, and they've been, I think so. Part of the reason Trump got elected, of many reasons, but the it was the crypto lobby, and the crypto lobby was the largest super PAC, which stands for Political Action Committee, and they pay for all the advertising for the politicians. So the crypto industry was contributed the most amount of money to politics this election, even more than the pharmaceutical industry, even more than all the other special interest lobbies. And so
Right.
that's it. So all politicians now are caring about crypto opinions because their reelection depends on it. So that's an important variable to understand. And in terms of XRP, I have a really close friend who's like an XRP maxi. Um, and for me, I don't know if XRP is like the future from a technical standpoint, but yeah, it sure does help to like have the ear of the president and all the politicians and everything. So I think that they could do well regardless.
It's is it a case of if XRP gets in, like, when Bitcoin wins, we kind of all win. If XRP wins, does Hex win as well? Does the whole entire ecosystem win?
Um, I mean, I think both can be true where, you can win. You're competing in different metrics. I think Hex is more interesting to people who like DeFi and who are wanting to practice delayed gratification and be a part of a community that's going to be around many years from now, like reliably. Um, I think both can have price appreciation that would surprise you to the upside, but I think yeah, I mean my money is in Hex and Pulse Chain because it's not just about making money. It's which making money is probably a really big part of it, but it's also about the DeFi ideals and XRP. Like it's not really competing to be, you know, focused on holding your own keys and um, that kind of stuff.
But
So,
this is where I enjoy working with you because although you're a Hexagon, you understand that there's other ecosystems. That is, the analogy I give is that when people say this is a better Bitcoin, I say, well, a car is not a better truck, and a truck is not a better car. They're both vehicles, and they both move something from point A to point B, but there are different tools for different jobs. And I see, just as we have on our highways of transport, we have cars and trucks and buses and motorbikes and so forth. But equally in crypto, we're going to have different cryptos that do different things. And the same on the internet of information, we have different websites that do different things. So where I get frustrated of all communities is probably the Bitcoin maxis. Now, for the viewers out there, I'm not a Hexagon. I've put a lot of time into this ecosystem. I've had the honor of interviewing Richard Hart 3 times. I've been deep diving into Hex before people even knew about Hex. I was reviewing Hex when it was called Bitcoin Hex. That's how far I go back in this timeline. And I can see that. And I thought that the XRP army was pretty intense, but the only tribes I've had to ban from my channel have in fact been Bitcoin maxis, because they kind of go too far. It's like, no, it's only this. And it's like, yeah, I get you're into your tribe, but Bitcoin's not going to do what Ethereum does, and it's not going to really do what Hex or XRP does. And I'm number one in Bitcoin. That's what I love the most, but I still like other coins. Now I can see what you've got here. You've got you're next to
yeah, like
God, you high roller. Tell me about this photo before we get back into the
yeah,
courtroom.
where was this? This was at one of the Ethereum conferences or something. Yeah, I think it was the ETH conference I went to. Oh
Is he a
no,
good
sorry,
guy?
this was Bitcoin. No, this was Bitcoin Nashville. This was Trump came to speak at that one. I think it was the day after this. But yeah, I like meeting famous crypto people and stuff. So I
Tell me how you met him. So obviously at the conference, you just walk up to him and say, "G'day, I'm Maddie. Can I get a photo with you?" Or how does it go?
Um, so like I pay attention. I mean, I used to run some conferences and stuff, so I just pay attention to like, all right, like where's the exit to the stage? Like where's the VIP section for the speakers? So just with like situational awareness, that's how I bumped into him. Um, was like he was going between the stage and like or another restricted area, and I was the only one. It's like recognize him, like move fast enough, and just be friendly. So yeah,
And what'd you say? He just said, "Hey, I'm Matt. Can I have a photo?" Or
yeah, and
I mean, he's a
we didn't
billionaire. I'm guessing he'd have to be close to it, surely.
totally,
Yeah.
totally, yeah. So we didn't. I mean, we didn't have too much to talk about, but yeah, I just like shouted him out.
Back to the courtroom. I'm interested. So you've got a courtroom. Was the courtroom full when it went to the Hex trial?
It was so full that there was an overflow room and that got filled up as well.
Wow.
And I'm told that like that is highly unusual, that like at these kind of cases it's pretty much unheard of to even have anybody in the public gallery.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And they were all Hexicans, I'm guessing. Did you see a sea of Hex paraphernalia per se, like T-shirts and
Yeah.
hats?
Oh yeah. I mean, we were all dressed in suits and everything, but yeah, like all the people I've known from the meetups over the years, and yeah, and then I think somebody counted that there were at least like 10 different countries represented, maybe 15,
Wow.
somewhere in there.
Why did they all go? I mean, obviously they support it, but what's the value? Tell me the insight, the psyche of traveling from where you are to go to a courtroom. I would get it if Richard Hart was there because people will go a long way to see a celebrity. They'll go a long way, even if they can't talk to him, just to see him. But I don't think he ever implied that he was going to be in the courtroom. So why were so
Correct.
many people going?
Like Richard Hart's lawyers suggested that the community show up
Okay.
um, to kind of to make a point to the court um, that this was like of high interest. And I'm really glad I went there because that allowed me to like understand like the mood and the tone of the judge and everything. And it really helped me, um, to understand and go back through the court records later on and like to really understand and see, how it all went.
And when
It
the
gave me more
announcement,
confidence. It gave me more confidence in the outcome.
when the actual announcement was made, did the courtroom cheer? Was there any noise?
So there was no announce. Okay, so we went to the courtroom in New York on Halloween, October 31st, and then we didn't get a ruling. Like basically at the end of that court hearing, it was just oral arguments. So the SEC made their arguments and Richard's lawyers made their arguments, and then it was over without the judge making a decision. And then she had like, normally 60 to 90 days, but we waited like 120 days to get a written decision. And that just came out on Friday.
Ah, I see. Right. Well, that's kind of anticlimactic, isn't it? Because I
Right.
picture in my mind everyone's in the room and everyone throws their hats in there and hurrah, we won. But it wasn't like that.
Right.
Damn it. Yeah, I'm also wondering, just I'm a details guy. So you're in the courtroom, everyone's sort of packed in there, and we're going back some time now. How many lawyers does each side have? Is it just one on one, or is there like a
So
bench full
there's
of lawyers?
so there's like four lawyers on the SEC side, and there's maybe six or seven lawyers on Richard's side.
Oh, that's so
And
gangster.
and there's the judge is like, all right, you have to pick one person to do your arguments, and both sides picked two people to handle different aspects of the case. And so that was kind of interesting as
And the
well.
judge was okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Richard Hart's team, they brought this giant poster board that was, I maybe like 4 feet. It was giant. It was a giant poster board. Uh, Maybe it was like 3 feet by 3 feet or something, but it had the timeline because their entire point was like the SEC said that Richard said these things, and that's what makes Hex a security. And but their timeline was off, where they said that he was offering. Basically, it came down to like three appearances that Richard did on YouTube. One of them was my Hex conference in 2022. And then there was another one, like another conference, and then there was like when Richard went on the Fresh and Fit podcast. So those three occurrences, the SEC was claiming he was promoting a crypto security offering, and but Hex wasn't. There was no Hex offering during the Hex conference. Like Hex only was offered if you say it that way, which we wouldn't say it that way, but even if you did say it that way, it was offered for the first year. that like Hex existed, there was like the adoption amplifier where you could mint your Hex. So the Hex conference was 2 years later. So the SEC didn't even get their timeline right. Their timeline was wrong of like, Richard said, he was promoting Hex as an unregistered security. Oh, when was he doing that? 2 years after the actual time when Hex was supposedly being offered. So that's really, really, really embarrassing. And that level
Absolutely.
of detail like shows you how bad the SEC's case was.
Yeah.
That the dates, that the timeline was wrong. I mean, it's
But
kind
but
of
that's it.
crazy,
That's the easiest thing to establish. The timeline. It's all there. It's all online.
right?
Everything's time stamped. I mean, you could
Right.
get a year 10 student to say, "Hey, can you just map out a timeline here and put a just write a line and put the timeline there," and they couldn't even get that right.
So that's why, like, from 5 different angles, with like the wrong timeline being one of them, anybody who understands like how a court case goes, it's like we didn't, we didn't think that this case was really going to make it anywhere. But we still had to suffer for the past 2 years. And yeah, so
And did Richard's lawyers they called out that erroneous accusation on the timeline?
yeah, like that's what their whole poster board was like a timeline of like, here's the Hex conference. Here's, these other 2 YouTube appearances, and here's like when the SEC is saying, that that they were alleging that the offerings were, and it doesn't match up. So
Utter incompetence and arguably corruption, because if you can't even get that stuff right, well, maybe you don't really have a case to make in the first case. And as we can see, this is what happens as Judge Amon threw the whole case out of court. I'm wondering, in your mind, Maddie, if Richard wasn't a billionaire, if he didn't have the financial resources to defend himself, could he have lost?
um I think, well, like, it's hard to answer that question because he is a billionaire, but like Richard's smart enough to where he could have won the case himself. Like he could have represented
Probably
himself
represented
and won.
himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking the same thing, that he could probably simply go in there and make his case himself, particularly if they held up a timeline. His memory is very sharp. He knows all of those details off the top of his head without even looking at a notepad, and he could have called it out there. Why didn't he go to the courtroom? Was he advised not to, or he just had better things on?
Yeah, I don't know why. It could be like some of the Interpol stuff that is like non-related. Um, or yeah, just like, I mean, he's made public statements before about like he doesn't like going to certain cities in the United States because of all the gun violence there and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so
I want to bring it back to you. I understand. I'm going back a little bit now because my fear, I remember going through this fear myself, where there was the SEC. Now, I'm in Australia, so I'm not in your jurisdiction, but I remember, I believe his name's Hexologist. He's got a pretty good channel. I've watched
oh
some of
yeah.
his stuff. I believe the Hexologist was attacked by the SEC from memory, and I think well, you've mentioned that you were attacked. Can you just
Yep.
unpack that for me a little bit? I remember being in fear of having simply interviewed Richard Hart and having spoken to you and having been to virtual Hex conferences. I'm like, man, am I going to get in trouble just for talking about this project? Let's bring it back to you, Hexologist, and anyone else who was attacked. What was the allegation? How did you fight it? And where are you now?
Um, yeah, I mean, there were like 30 at least, broadcasters within the Hex community that got subpoenas. And yeah,
All
like
American, obviously.
getting a subpoena as a witness, it's not supposed to, that isn't saying that you did anything wrong. It's saying that they want information from you. And, you know, pleading the fifth and like, not giving information when you don't have to, that's a useful strategy. But yeah, I mean, so now it seems like all of that has pretty much gone away. Thankfully, with this ruling on Friday. But I can tell you, even 6 weeks ago, the SEC, they were still harassing me,
In what way?
drawing up new subpoenas for no reason and stuff, asking the same questions they asked before, and that was even under the Trump administration. So that goes to show you. And hexologists, like, they even subpoenaed his wife, who doesn't go on channels, and like she doesn't even know how hex works. But they were just this is lawfare, where they're just they're just trying to mess you up. The process is the punishment type thing.
That's right. So did it cost you money?
Yeah. So luckily, like, the community stepped in and crowdfunded all of the legal expenses for all of us.
How much are we talking about? As in, how much did it
Um,
cost the community?
a
How much in
lot,
legal fees? To do what? To
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
what? In just legal representation, just to say, leave me alone type of stuff? What's the cost?
Um, yeah, like, it's very expensive to have like really good lawyers, and there's a lot of bad lawyers out there that will not they'll lead you the wrong way. So yeah, like, I think I always felt very lucky, because I would not have been able to keep reporting on this and using my free speech
Mm.
without the support of, like, the hex whales out there.
It leads to the obvious question. Did Richard Hart help the community with his billions of dollars? Did he make any contributions to your legal defense?
I think, like, it's not clear that he made any direct contribution. But whoever did, it was because they made so much money off of Hex last cycle, which is, due to Richard's good design, and maybe the buybacks that occurred, with the Ethereum that was put into Hex originally, ended up helping Hex do a 10,000x last cycle. And so many millionaires were made, one way or another, that helped facilitate this.
Did you? I'm sorry to ask the tough questions, but again, as a non-Hexican, I need to see both sides here. You've given so much to this community. You've put in so much time. So as hexologists, so have these other people. They then get attacked legally for defending the project. The head of the project's a billionaire. Did any of you or the community at any time say, "Hey, Richard, we need your help now. We're helping you on this side, but now we need you to help us"? Did that ever happen, or did you ever feel that?
Um, like, yeah, so, like, there had to be kind of a separation there because of the legal situation. And so, yeah, I think, um, Richard never left. He's tweeted consistently. He didn't pull a Satoshi. Like, he stopped live streaming, but he has been extremely helpful and supportive of the community, just as much as we have been towards him and everything. And at the end of the day, like, this is not a company. He doesn't owe us anything. We started with this idea of, we're not. This is not a security, and part of not being a security is, the influencers don't get paid by a centralized entity, and that's
Mm.
how we're different than pretty much every other community. Is we're organic, and we had already stood on that when times were good. And so when times were bad, if anything, it became a filter for the people who were not there for the right reasons. They left. And, you know, there's always going to be haters on the internet, but, like, in this case, there are a lot of good people that rose to the top. And so that's something to be proud of, it wasn't just a situation where it was all bad that came out of it. But I think we've been forged in fire before the 10,000x, after the 10,000x, and now going into the next step.
So for you, hexologists, the 30 others that have had the subpoenas placed on them, Is it all over now? Like, can you sleep at night knowing that there's no more coming in? Is there any official letter that someone writes you and goes, "You're good, Maddie. We're not going to harass you anymore," or is it just a case of nothing heard, nothing seen? It's out of mind.
Um, well, I haven't really gotten a chance to talk to my lawyers about it yet in detail since it just happened on Friday afternoon. But I can say that, like, yeah, the fear is subsided now that the judge has ruled, and that's the closest thing we're gonna get to, like, hey, you know, this part, this thing is over, this oppression and persecution. And at the same time, as a public figure, you know, we have to understand that we can always become targets of some lawfare or some, like, unfair legal process, and that's part of being a leader online today. Is that, like, sometimes you can get hit with a frivolous lawsuit.
And as you said, sometimes the process is the punishment. Even if you know that you're not guilty, the sheer fact that you have to turn up to court or hire a lawyer or have a sleepless night or 2 or 10 or 100, even if it's all a frivolous lawsuit, just that stress in itself. Did you find that any of those people that were getting attacked per se by the SEC, did any of them take it harder than others?
Yeah, definitely. And part of it, I'm sure we'll never really know because people just kind of, faded away. But I can tell you that of the people I know, Captain RG3, Crypto Coffee, Hexologist, myself, that's a good chunk right there of people who they didn't flinch. We kept doing exactly what we have been doing. And, so I mean, that's pretty incredible. That's not something you're going to find every day in a group of people. And I think it's partly because we're a special community.
You absolutely are. And congratulations to you and to everyone out
Thank
there,
you.
because it, you were personally at the front line of this in more ways than one. And many Hexicans were. For the viewers out there, what's interesting, and maybe you don't know this as either, Maddie, so I'll tell you and I'll tell you publicly. I'm very honored that some Hexicans often reach out to me and say, can we have a conversation? And they want to talk to me because they want my perspective. Not that I'm an expert in anything, but just perhaps asking questions. They want to get my insight or perspective from an outsider's view on what's happening in Hex. And as you know, Maddie, I keep saying it over and over again, I'm not a Hexican, and that's a good thing. And many people want to paint me as a Hexican. For the viewers out there, as I said, I've interviewed Richard Hart several times. I was interviewing Richard and deep diving in the project all the way back when it's called Bitcoin Hex. I did the same for deep dives for Pulse, into PulseX. But I try to keep on the skirt of the community to the extent that my goal is to act as a bridge, perhaps as a bridge from the normies, crypto normies, into the hex space and vice versa. And many really OG Hexicans have reached out to me and said, hey, can we have a conversation about what you see, what's happening here? And I give this to you in good faith, my friend. I think the number one thing in my mind for Hex to succeed from here is the number one thing that you have to do is sort out your on ramps. Now, we talk about it being gate kept. We can see what Uniswap did. We can see that other exchanges have pushed you off. What I would really like to see is an easy on ramp into this ecosystem. Now, this isn't new. This has been around for a long time. Getting Hex wasn't as straightforward as going on to Coinbase and saying buy. It doesn't quite work that way. The second part, of course, is the friction, and it's not a debate I want to get into here, but there's a friction without a doubt when it comes to E-hex versus P-hex. You and I have discussed this at length. Some say it should be E, some say it should be P, some say it should be both. My perspective is that Pulse Chain was built for a reason. Richard Hart released a tweet saying along the lines of, this is what Pulse Chain was for, to reduce the, not his words, but my words, the retardation of the Hex ecosystem with the ridiculous gas fees on Ethereum. But when I speak to some Hexicans, it's like, no, you should get E, no, you should get P, no, you should get both. And that in itself is something that I strongly encourage, and I give this to the Hexicans in good faith and as an ally, I strongly encourage you to sort that out. Whatever it is, make a move on it. And you say, well, it's a free market, we're going to have both. And my first principles are, yeah, free market. But I'm telling you, as an outsider, as an investor, as a commentator, that creates a lot of confusion. And the third part I would suggest is that working on the reputation of the whole ecosystem, which is actually happening right now with the legal case dropped against Richard Hart. That's a great thing for the whole entire ecosystem, for the perception of it. On those first 2 points, where do we go with Hex now? Is it P? Is it E? Again, I don't want to get into a deep debate about it because there's a divide within the ecosystem. But what are your thoughts on it?
They both are performing well. And so now that the fees on Ethereum have been so low because of layer twos and because of maybe Vitalik like not wanting to get into a high fee situation again where people have to spend $100 to do a swap like they did in 2021. I think eHex is looking better than it was maybe a year ago when we didn't know if Ethereum gas fees were going to be lower, or certainly back in 2021 when the fees for Hex were just crazy. And so, so I think like people who are more comfortable on Ethereum, they don't want to like go on to Pulse Chain right away without having a good experience with one of the RH products. And that's actually why I think that what Richard's team should do is they should have a version of PulseX on Ethereum, the DEX. So like Uniswap, you can use the protocol across multiple chains. I think if the Ethereum whales got to use PulseX to swap like USDC to ETH back and forth on Ethereum, then they wouldn't have to leave the chain that they're comfortable with. They can have a good experience with an RH product, and then that would, make it more easy for them to trust coming onto Pulse Chain and using a whole different network. Yeah. So
I can see there's a lot of development on Pulse. Let's transition to Pulse now. So 5 years in the future, let's look at your crystal ball. In 5 years in the future, let's talk about money first. Those who invested in Pulse. So I'm going to go into 2 parts. 1, those who sacrifice for Pulse, will they get their returns? And 2, do you think a lot of people will move over from developing on Ethereum and instead develop on Pulse? And let me just make a caveat on the second part. Many people get, hang on, I've got to be careful with my words here. Allow me to go back a step. Maddie, you're a counselor, so you understand where I'm coming from. I've always had great admiration for the Hexicans, that they were a very mature audience, so that they could handle debate very well. What I've noticed in the last 12 months is that there's a new generation of some, not all, but some Hexicans that have become quite aggressive. And they speak in a way that the OG Hexicans didn't speak. The OGs, such as yourself, is that if I ask you a question, I'm like, well, what does this mean and why did you do that? Instead of saying, oh, you're a hater, you're a doubter, rah-rah, you just go, oh, good question, this is the answer. And I've always thoroughly enjoyed that about the Hex space. And I go back to a time that I interviewed a guy called, I think his name was something Tran, and I put it out to the community. I put it out to the world. I said, look, I've spoken about all the positive stuff about Hex. I've explored it. Let's balance the argument and get the other side. And I put it out to the world, and there was a lot of people saying, Hex is a scam, Hex is a scam. And I say, cool, come onto the channel, show your name, show your face, and let's talk about it. And eventually someone spoke about it. Someone came forward and said, yeah, I'll come onto your channel. I'm like, cool. And it was a live stream no, it wasn't a live stream. It was pre-recorded. And I said to the audience, I said, look, we've heard all the positive things about Hex. Let's hear the other side. And what I was so impressed by was the Hexicans' response that no one, not a single person of the thousands of views on that video said, this guy's an idiot, he's stupid, he doesn't understand anything. What I got in response was a very balanced, mature, professional response from the Hexicans out there. 43 OG says he remembers that stream. And it was testament to the Hexicans. It was a beautiful example of how an intelligent community who could back up their product could respond to persecution, albeit from one person, of their product. What I've noticed, noting I live in this space full time, is that there seems to be a new generation, a new breed, a new type of hexagon that's coming in that doesn't respond that way. They're very aggressive. They're very single-minded. They're very, in many instances, abusive of any questioning, and that actually pushed me back from the ecosystem for a while. So on the Sunday summary, every week I'd bring up the Go Pulse synopsis, or the web page, to say this is what's happening in the RH ecosystem. But when it got too aggressive, I'm like, yeah, I've got to step back from this for a while. So the reason why I raise this with you now is because I'm wondering, are you seeing a new breed of hexagons and pulsicons coming in that aren't like the OGs, or is it just me?
I think there's always been crybabies and bullies there, and sometimes it's easier to tune them out, and sometimes people go from being reasonable to uh, being moody and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to be a decentralized community uh, because you can't just cut out toxic people, because like, you know, they're there and it's the internet and you can't just like shut them off. And so the best thing that we can do is um try to set the culture, by having the people who are positive, by elevating them up. I did a post the other day where I had found that there's one hexagon who's a newer, like had gotten in the past 2 or 3 years, and her metrics were off the chart. Um, she had like 10 times less followers and was getting like 10 times more engagement, just because she was being so positive. And so I think a lot of people who have been in the community, uh, the YouTuber, the 100+ YouTubers that we have on our Hex and Pulsing conferences every year, we're kind of learning, to just pay more attention and raise up people who are more positive, whether they're new or old.
Good on you, because I would hate to see that brand be eroded. Well, to be honest with you, I felt I was seeing it being eroded. The
Yeah,
brand of, as I
it
described, was
was.
yeah, it was. And thank you for acknowledging that. So I now bring it back to Pulse. So as I said, the two-part question to Pulse, and the second part will make more sense. So the first part is, when are we going to see a return on Pulse, taking away all amplifiers and those who sacrificed early? At the moment, we can see it's at 0.42 of sacrifice. My real question for that first part is, when am I going to see it at 10 times sacrifice? The second part is, when it comes to the development on Pulse, I can't see a lot of development on there, with a caveat. There is a lot happening on there from those in the RH ecosystem. There is a lot of development on Pulse. What I'm really asking is, when will people start to say, right, I have nothing to do with Pulse. I'm not a hexagon. I'm not a pulsicon. I'm just a crypto developer. I'm sick of Sui. I'm sick of Solana. I'm sick of Cardano. I'm sick of Ethereum. I'm now developing on Pulse. When are we going to see that happening?
I think we'll, as this news gets out there, and everything, as this crypto cycle continues, I think the next step that you might see would be a centralized exchange listing, which would then
Mm.
add credibility to credibility. And then that might bring in more developers and people building. Because the builders really don't know where to go right now. A lot of them, like, are not happy with Ethereum. They're not happy with Solana. And so, some of them are on base, but that's also got problems. So,
Mm.
yeah, like that I think in terms of builders, that's kind of a thing. But yeah, what was your more general question about Pulse Chain?
When am I going to get rich off Pulse
Right,
after my
right.
sacrifice? When am I
So in
rich?
order to really understand like what the economics are of like the Pulse Chain price, um we have to acknowledge that like when people sacrificed for Pulse Chain, that was at the top. So people were putting in like $60,000 Bitcoin for their sacrifice. And the price of Bitcoin did not stay at $60,000 after that. It went down to 15K about. You could buy Grayscale Bitcoin for 50% off of that. So you could buy it for $8,000 per Bitcoin and then redeem it when the ETFs launched. So so the fact that people, were sacrificing at those high levels, Hex was at a super high level that was unsustainable without the sacrifice happening. So if $2 billion of value on paper was put into Pulse Chain and Pulse X in sacrifice form, there was not $2 billion of liquidity to remove. And so the price that Hex even was not a price where everybody could cash out, of course.
Right.
Just like in Bitcoin, that's the case at all times, that like not everybody can cash out all at the same time. And so like how we even understand the amount that people sacrificed, like that goes into the equation of like, what can people take out now? Like what is that ratio of Pulse to USDC looking like now? And then there were whales that got bonus multipliers of up to 2.5 or 2.3 X. And so that also, like, you have to ask yourself the question of like, which participant is it that's in profit or not in profit compared to sacrifice? Now, the sacrifice was a real sacrifice. Like you were sending a crypto transaction, which means not your keys, not your coins. So when I click send on something, it's not mine anymore. And nobody promised you anything for Pulse Chain other than imaginary points. And so the fact that it has any value is that can't be overlooked, is the fact that basically you weren't promised anything and you got an airdrop and it has some value. If you sold on day one, your Pulse was up 2x. And your Pulse X was up 1.5x. So anybody who didn't sell on day one, they were greedy, holding out for more. They really believed in the thing. That was me. I didn't sell any. And then we went down 90%. Okay. That, that was an opportunity to buy. Then from January of last year to March of last year, you got a 10x run in Pulse Chain. You got a 20x
I've got
run
it on a chart. Do you want to bring it up? I've got it on screen here.
Sure. Yeah. I'll add the screen there.
So what you're talking about is this point right here. So when had you bought here, you had this 10x run up here.
Right. And the point when you would have bought was the last day of the Hex conference on January 9th of 2024, when Richard Hart's legal team showed their cards and said, we're the team that represent Elon Musk and we're representing Richard Hart and we think we're going to win. And here's a letter on why we think we're going to win. And so that was announced on the last day of the Hex conference, January 9th, 2024. And so you could have bought on that day like I did. And then you could have sold on March 9th, which was the end of the Pulse Chain conference, but it was also the top of Bitcoin. The entire crypto market peaked at that point. And so
that's the yellow for the viewers out there. That's the yellow line I've just drawn in.
Yeah. So I mean, there have been like, and if you were in PulseX, you did about twice as well, or 1.5x as well, because of how the liquidity was set up and everything. So like, yeah. So there's this there's this huge valuation. There was this $2 billion valuation that like wasn't sustainable when the sacrifice happened. And then when Pulse Chain launched, like, you could have cashed out, but we didn't. And then, then it was a long bear market in in this chain, until about a year ago, a year and 2 or 3 months ago. And then you got this huge run. And what we're seeing now in terms of like the writing on the wall is that I think we're going to have another run here. Um, that's
All-time
gonna
highs?
that's
New
gonna
all-time
happen
highs?
and create all-time highs. Yep.
What are you feeling most bullish about? Pulse, PulseX? Randomly, Incentive seems to be doing the best, or Hex, in recent times, I should say. Someone comes into the ecosystem, not financial advice. They want to have a play in here. What do? They got $100. They put $25 on each one. Pulse, PulseX, Incentive, and Hex. They go all in on Hex. Where do you think is
I would keep it simple. 100% in Pulse X.
Pulse X? Right.
Yep.
Okay. That seems to. Oh, so I'll bring up the Pulse X chain chart now. So Pulse X is actually getting a lot of use. So it's a lot of real-time use on this ecosystem. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, this is like it's a buy and burn kind of like a BNB token, and that's in the top 10 cryptos. But this one is a Uniswap fork, and so Uniswap could be in the top 10 crypto prices if it had an automatic buy and burn like PulseX does, but it doesn't. They take all the profits for themselves instead of sharing it with the token holders.
So every time a transaction happens on Pulse X, there's a little burn function there, reducing the supply, thus keeping all things consistent, increasing the price.
And there's been already over 6% of the entire supply has been bought and burned through that decentralized mechanism.
That's significant, and I'm guessing that supply can never be increased later.
Correct. It's PulseX is strictly a deflationary token. All the PulseX that will ever exist already exists, and so that's another like unique feature here. The more volume that Pulse Chain gets, because PulseX is the most liquid DEX, you're going to see even more buying and burning. This thing is only it's not even 2 years old. It'll be 2 years old in the middle of May, and it's already burned over 6% of its entire supply. If the volume goes up more, it will burn more over the next 2 years than it did in the prior 2 years.
It's funny, isn't it? Because there was so much work put into both Hex and Pulse. And correct my memory if it's wrong, but the way I remember it is that Hex was a big project. It took for ages. Pulse was a huge project for obvious reasons. You're basically forking everything on the Ethereum chain. Very impressive. Even in theory, it's impressive, but in actual practice, it's just like, wow. But PulseX, from my memory, was the easiest of the three to create. That is, it happened so quickly. It's like, oh, I'm just going to fork Uniswap. And yet here we go. It's one of the most effective, arguably, of the entire ecosystem, and perhaps the best price performance. Have I recalled that correctly? That PulseX was like so much quicker and easier to make than Hex and Pulse?
Yes.
Yeah. And then now, consequently, the price is arguably going to perform better than, as you suggest, better than Hex, Incentive, and Pulse.
I think Hex could outperform PulseX, but Hex is more unpredictable because of the unlocks that are happening.
Yeah.
That represent inflation to the system. So I think for somebody new, if they just and like PulseX is like you don't have to get into the eHex pHex stuff either. I think if somebody's more advanced, such as myself, like when I am looking at a portfolio, I'm like, oh, cool, 50% Hex, 50% PulseX, like that's good. But yeah, if I want to keep it simple for somebody who's brand new, let's just keep it simple. Like let's just PulseX, one thing. Then we don't have to get into like the two different versions of Hex, like like you've said. is
And where would they
confusing.
buy PulseX? Because we see this is where it gets a bit grey. So Uniswap delisted Hex and Pulse. Is that right? I know they delisted Hex. But if you want to come in to buy PulseX, where would you buy it? I mean, I sacrificed for it, so I've got big bags just sitting in the background doing nothing. But a newbie comes in and they want to buy PulseX. Where do they go?
Well, hopefully in the next month, you could go to like Binance or Coinbase or Kraken and buy it. But until then, yeah, you would have to uh, go to, you would go to the Pulse Chain bridge. You would go to
Mm.
pulsechain.com. You would click the add network button with your MetaMask, and then you have your Ethereum that you already bought, and then you bridge that over to Pulse Chain. When you bridge it over using the official bridge that's listed on pulsechain.com, and it's not Googled because there's like, scam links in Google. But yeah, you just go to pulsechain.com. It's going to tell you exactly how to bridge. There's like a community run bot that will like give you enough gas, enough like pulse tokens to where that problem is solved. So you bridge your ETH over and the bot hits you with some pulse to like do your transactions there on Pulse Chain. And you can use pulsex.com to do the swap, which is also linked to off of pulsechain.com. And then you can swap your ETH for PulseX and you're good.
Oh, is that all you do? So, so
I
this is where
mean,
the ecosystem.
I always say buying Bitcoin when it was a penny, you had to send a money order to Japan, and that's a lot of steps to go to your bank and to go to the post office and to know that you're sending it to the right place and everything. So
Yeah, it's true.
it's
Like in
not
the
that
early,
hard,
you're right. In the early days of Bitcoin, it was a nightmare to buy the bloody stuff. Now it's you can get it on your phone whilst you're walking down the street.
right?
But those who got in early, those who cracked the code, they made a lot of money. And in defense of the ecosystem, for the RH ecosystem, at least now you've got YouTube. Like in the olden days, YouTube sort of existed, but it's not to the extent that we've got now. And there wasn't the content creator experience or knowledge or even vast variety of content creators that can help you through these um, challenges of bridging and so forth. Even for the newbies, just simply buying. I guess it leads to the question: is when are we going to see, now that we've got the SEC off our back or off your back, when are we going to see one of these coins listed on a SEX like Coinbase or Binance? Two parts. Which one's going to go first? Pulse, PulseX, Incentive, Hex, and when?
I think Kraken is like the friendliest, so it might be there, but it also might be Coinbase, um, because there's like a longevity foundation that the Hex community has supported many times, and there was actually a Hexakin. Well, I'm not sure if it's a Hexakin, but there was a Pulse Chain user who donated 300 million tokens of PDI to the Sense Foundation. And so I just met with them last week and explained like how good it would be for them to try to get Coinbase to list us, to list Pulse Chain and PDI, because this foundation, this longevity science foundation, they their donation is worth, several multiple millions of dollars, maybe, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, somewhere around there. But they already have connections at Coinbase, and so I think I think that there's three potential reasons why why we haven't gotten listed already. It was the SEC stuff. Um, some OG Bitcoiners hate Richard Hart because he used to be a maxi and then he vampire attacked the Bitcoiners by creating his own token. And let me see, what's the third reason?
SEC, Bitcoin maxis hating Richard.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember like what's the typical third reason I give. Oh, like the outrage marketing stuff. Um, which
Other
was
rage marketing.
basically Richard like, just telling people not to buy the top of Hex
Oh, that, yeah.
without saying that. So, and then you could add a fourth one of like, you know, they're not sure about the origin address owning 90% of the tokens. But they listed Trump, all of these exchanges listed the Trump meme coin when they owned 90 when he owned 90% of
Mm.
it. And the David Portnoy coins and the Argentina coins and all this different stuff. So the reasons are falling apart and the community is only getting stronger. There's no longer, a 90% thing rule. And the origin address in Hex has locked up all of its Hex, like all of it, like billions and billions and billions of dollars of Hex. Hex is 99% locked,
Okay, let me
or
touch on that one because that
95 or something. Yeah.
do we. One of the frustrations I had, and every ecosystem gives me frustrations, but one of the frustrations I had with Hex was that the OA wouldn't admit he was the OA. Do we now have that admission that the that the founder admits that he's the OA?
No, and you probably won't see that.
Okay, but what we do have at a minimum is that the OA, whoever he, she, or they may be, has now taken their entire 90% stack, or sorry, that 90% of the entire supply and
Right.
staked the whole lot
For Hex, yeah.
for 15 years.
I think about half of it was for 15 years and the other half was for like a month.
Why didn't that drive the price up? Because again, allow me to ask the silly questions for those who are as silly as me. When you stake your crypto, when you stake your Hex, you're kind of burning it at the stake. Like it takes it out of the supply. Is that right?
Right.
So if I take 90% of the supply and I stake it, which in technical terms is actually burning it, at least for the duration of the stake, why didn't I see an immediate spike in the price? What happened?
Because that Hex wasn't being sold anyway.
Gotcha.
So it doesn't go into the equation of
Yeah.
like the sells and the buys, um, changing the ratio of the price.
So rolling with that then, because the next fear for that is once it's unstaked in 7 or 15 years, and suddenly you flood the market with millions, billions of Hex units. Are you fearful that that could affect the price, or is it the same? Is it the same sentiment? Well, it wasn't being sold anyway, but now it could be sold. I think I'm
Yeah.
trying to ask: is it more dangerous when it becomes unstaked than when we did stake it?
Well, if it's in a user's hands, then yeah, like people can sell it because they have a. You can see that the wallets have a history of selling it. If it's somebody's money, but if it's the origin address money, that's never sold a single hex. So that kind of that would that's a 5-year track record that's pretty impressive and is helping build confidence in the system. It doesn't mean that it can't be sold in the future, but it's pretty unique in terms of making Hex stand out currently. So it's a good selling point that the founder or like the largest holder has never sold. That's cool. And part of the origin address locking all of its Hex might not have been to get Hex listed on a centralized exchange. It might have been, or also is to decrease the inflation of Hex that's being paid to early participants to make a better deal for new participants to come in and see, and for that price appreciation to transfer directly into the price of Hex instead of being diluted by the greater amount by people being paid out more coins that altogether are worth more, but you're not getting all of that action translated onto the price chart where you have your best marketing is green candles for attracting new participants.
More devil's advocate questions here. So I've taken 90% of the supply. I've locked it up. I'm earning up to 40% per annum. If I take 90% of the supply, lock it up for 15 years. I know you said one's shorter and one's longer, but keeping things consistent. On the outside, if I'm thinking, well, hang on, I've got billions of tokens locked up, increasing at a rate of up to 40% per annum. Could it in fact go the other way, where people wrongly or rightly perceive that in fact, now that we've got this massive, huge supply locked up and it's getting APY paid to itself, then although the circulating supply right now is relatively lower because we've just taken 90% out, the total supply in the future is going to be massive because billions of hex have been locked up, earning 40% inflation or growth per annum.
So the more hex that's locked, the lower the inflation is.
Of the circulating supply, but not of that's locked up, because what's locked up is increasing in amount, isn't it?
So it's a variable APY in hex that's paid in hex terms. And so whereas you used to get 38 or 40% APY for time locking hex for a long time, and only about 10% for locking for a year. Now that inflation, that APY has been slashed because part of the reason for the origin address was to be able to adjust the inflation, just like the Fed adjusts their interest rates. And so, so by the OA staking, it made hex more scarce in the future because in terms of the user controlled hex that's not part of the OA, because it's basically diluting the payouts of everybody who's already in the system in a way to where now people are going to have less hex to sell on the market.
But in the future, when that 90% of the total supply is unlocked, that scares me. Like, wow, at least I can see.
But it was already unlocked for 5 years and it didn't sell. And so it's pretty clear that like all it's doing right now is just changing it's basically lowering the inflation rate of hex to make hex more scarce.
Has anyone ever asked you what if you just burnt the whole lot? What if you took that entire supply and instead of locking it up, so you didn't sell it when it was liquid, you're not going to sell it.
But then you wouldn't be able to adjust the interest rate up and down, like has provably working for like, for the fiat, for the whole dollar, for the whole dollar system of the Federal Reserve. Like that's a really, 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 really important part of like monetary theory and supply and markets is like having an adjustable interest rate.
Who's adjusting that interest rate in the hex ecosystem?
The stakers. But in this case, largely the origin address.
If in the event that the OA passed, disappeared, died, whatever, what happens then? So you've got 90% locked up. The OA or that whoever owns that dies. How does that affect the future when it comes to the ecosystem? Is there, to be blunt, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing for everyone else?
Well, to go to that, if we're going to do the thought experiment there, then I'll just give you the easy answer that the network would, maybe hex would fork into 2 different hexes and it would get tried 2 different ways until people decide which one they like better.
Another fork.
It's like, asking like, well, what would happen if Satoshi never came back and the Bitcoin community got split into like 2 different ideas about big blocks or little blocks. Well, Bitcoin is more successful than ever on like a yearly time scale. So like, I think that the hex would be just the same, where it would, you could, even if it had, as Roger Ver would say in his book, like even if somebody tried to hijack it or something went really wrong, you would still end up with like Bitcoin Cash is like that's achieving things that Bitcoin isn't achieving, and like, you know, they do impressive things. And then for price performance, there's a different version of Bitcoin that like came out of the original, and like the people who owned Bitcoin in 2016 and like held their own keys, they own both of those now. So they didn't even have to do anything.
That's right. I read that book, Hijacking Bitcoin. It's very interesting, and it was you know, I remember, well, it's an audio book as I was listening to it. It's like, in some instances, I thought, wow, Bitcoin Cash should have come out on top, but it didn't.
Yeah.
But you know, because
Yeah.
some parts of the book were very convincing, and I'm like, yeah, that really makes a lot more sense, and maybe Ver's onto something here. But it's as you said, ultimately the truth is in the market, and if the market wanted Bitcoin, then Bitcoin Core is the Bitcoin with a $2 trillion market cap. Not at time of recording, it's about 1.6. I've got it right here. But what have we got at Bitcoin at the moment? Oh, Bitcoin's dropped down to number 9 at $1.7 trillion. Oh, Bitcoin was at 7 in the global rankings. Before we sign off, Maddie, just because I've got to go into another show, looking at the macro, how are you
Yes.
feeling about crypto in total? So let's go big picture. You're an
Oh, this is gonna be
American.
juicy.
All right.
Okay.
You've got free reign over to you. Where are we going?
Oh man. Okay. So I believe, Adam, and this might be, I've just recently started talking about this. I believe that the 4 year cycle is broken. Our 4 year cycle was only really 3 data points. That is barely enough data to do an actual mathematical trend, let alone like a whole theory on like the 4 year cycle, 4 year, cycle theory. Like Bitcoin mining has changed a lot in the past 12 years to drive the 4 year cycle. But more importantly, the US is in a trade war. Trump did a trade war last time he was in office. And this cycle, if you look at it, in some ways, we might look back and say, wow, that really was left translated and it fell apart to where now I think that all bets are off. And when you would normally see a bear market 2 years from now might be the time when we see our next all-time high of Bitcoin. We could witness if the trade war. So here's why this could occur where you break the 4 year cycle is a trade war increases prices. That increases inflation. That makes it so the Federal Reserve does not lower rates, they raise rates.
That's right. Yeah.
So if they raise rates, then everybody's risk off, liquidity in the market dries up, and things have to get bad enough to where, you know, the trading, you know, like rules go back to normal, you know, maybe the terror, there's too much political pressure, you know, but I think that the United States economy is going to be much healthier in 2 years than it is now if all of this stuff works. But when the Department of Government Efficiency goes out and cuts $2 trillion worth of fraud and waste and abuse, you have to remember that that money was going somewhere. And if most of it was going outside of the country, then fine, that's not going to cause a recession. But even if you were paying corrupt politicians and then they were using that money to like employ people in the US and to like buy super jets or, you know, yachts or something that were like holding up the American economy, I don't think they really know with all these fraud and Doge cuts and everything. I don't think they really know how much that's going to crash the economy. And so that's why they talked about giving out these $5,000 checks to anybody who pays their taxes, is because they don't even know when they expose all this fraud whether people are going to keep paying their taxes. So they had to create an incentive for people to pay their taxes, and then $5,000 back is 20% of the savings of all the stuff that Elon is catching. And so that is also a stimulus that would need to happen to help counterbalance all of like the recession and depression you're going to cause by turning off, all this $2 trillion of waste. And so I think that, I also think that it's the perfect trap to like have three times when anytime in the past when somebody said this time is different, they got wrecked compared to the person who just played the 4 year cycle. The 4 year cycle was so predictable, it was so reliable, it was the only thing you needed to understand in crypto, really. So that makes it a really good opportunity this time where, you know, people bought Bitcoin at $8,000 and then they sold it at 108,000. Michael Saylor bought $15 billion worth of Bitcoin, um, higher than the price is now. And so if he couldn't keep the price up, who's going to keep the price up? And, maybe somebody will. But from where I'm sitting, I'm like you already have a Wyckoff distribution on like the, which I don't know anything about TA, but you already have like you have like a Bart Simpson or Wyckoff like happening to Bitcoin right now. So yeah, I really think it could be broken. We could see Bitcoin not go above 100K for a year or two, and then we get a crazy breakout where then you get your $250,000 Bitcoin when we're supposed to be in a bear market.
That's a really powerful analysis. I can't remember who said it, but he said that the most dangerous thing you can say about a market is that this time will be different. And he said the second most dangerous thing you can say is laughing at the person who said this time will be different. Because,
Right.
yeah, because it could go either way. Now, I agree with you entirely. I don't think we have enough data points to actually figure out what is the pattern. And it was pretty obvious when, the halving was the real effect on the 4 year cycle. But what's so different now is that the halving isn't such a big hit in the sense that when you go from 50 BTC block rewards to 25, that's a big hit. 25
Yeah.
per 10 minutes. That's a lot less. Now, of course, the market cap's smaller, but it's still relatively a massive hit. But when you're going from 6.125 down to 3 and then to 1.5, that hit isn't so big. But of course, what's also different is that it used to just be us, Matty, us degen retail investors. We were on our own
Right.
here. Then you had the big boys come in with the institutional investors. But then, of course, the other part is you've got now nation state investors coming in. So it is different because we've never had this before. We've never had so many banks involved. We've never had so many nations involved. We've never had the center of the financial system of the world saying we could be adopting this as a strategic reserve. So it is absolutely different this time. The real question is, though, is the 4 year cycle broken? And only time will tell. But what you said was quite striking to me is that, yeah, if Doge, and I just brought it up there before, you can see that Doge, according to this data set from usdebtclock.org, within less than 2 months, Doge has saved, allegedly, $153 billion. Now, that $153 billion in 6 weeks, you're dead right, it was going somewhere. Now, where was it going? Was it going to good things or bad things? Well, at the end of the day, it was going outwards. It was coming out of the government one way or another and going into the economy, whether that was the US economy or the global economy. You're right, there's $153 billion that's been taken out of that circulating supply in the economy and it's being held. Equally, you're right that if you are tariffing the crap out of the world, in the short to medium term, that will undeniably lead to prices going up. Now, it doesn't lead to inflation of the money supply, but it does lead to inflation of money prices. And then, as you rightfully said, it then leads to the Fed saying, well, hang on a second, prices are going up. Whether it's prices going up because things are more expensive because supply is shorter, or it's prices are going up because we printed too much cash and we've lost purchasing power, or it's both. We're printing lots of money and these supplies are in lower supply because people are less inclined to sell them to us, or we're less inclined to buy it from them. The prices are still going up. And consequently, you're dead right. The Fed then has to go, well, we can't reduce interest rates. In fact, what we have to do is we have to increase or at least hold interest rates, which then leads on to, as you rightfully said, I can't believe how much agreements we are in here, is that what it then leads to, of course, is, well, if the interest rates are high, there's less expendable cash, there's less global liquidity, and there's less money coming into the markets. But then I think perhaps the next part from that is, I think we can see many nations want to boycott the US dollar. That's where that's BRICS came up. But we saw Trump come back and say any nation that adopts BRICS, we're going to immediately put 100% tariff on you. So it's like that seems to have stopped BRICS dead in its track. But I've often
Right.
said that the competition isn't actually between the US dollar and BRICS. I've often said that perhaps the competition when it comes to a reserve is it's actually between the US dollar and Bitcoin. And
Mm.
maybe we're seeing that now because BRICS has maybe been extinguished with a very firm statement. If you adopt BRICS, we're putting 100% tariffs on you. That's a
Right.
pretty strong statement. So maybe that's just distinguished that one. But I think what Trump's doing right here is he's saying, well, why don't we adopt both? What if the competition is between Bitcoin and the US dollar? We've already got the US dollar. How about we become the Bitcoin capital of the world, which is already basically said? And if you can, of course, reduce tax on your own people and reduce waste on your own people, I think America's poised to become even stronger. But what's interesting to me is that you're getting a lot of pushback within the states. Like what astonishes me, and we won't get too political here because it's going to trigger a lot of people. I'm astonished at how many people are upset that audits are occurring. Like I audit myself regularly. I audit my
Right.
emails. I audit my accounts. I audit my company. Why wouldn't I audit myself? But then when a government comes and goes, right, we're going to audit. It's like, we didn't vote for Elon. It's like, well, you did because Trump said, I'm going to open Doge. Elon's going to be at the helm. Who wants to vote for me? So you kind of did vote for him. But on the other hand, no one ever talks about Fauci. I never voted for Fauci, and Fauci shut
Right.
down the whole bloody world. And the radicals never seem to have a problem with Fauci shutting down the world, who then got a presidential pardon. And why on earth would you need a presidential pardon for giving what, medical advice?
Right.
It all stinks. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, politics matters for finance because that's a major driver of, like, of our currency and of our economic policy. And like you gave with the example of COVID, it's like, well, yeah, like people were told they're not allowed to go to work. Yeah, that's going to screw up your economy, and then they try to paper over it with printing more, more money than ever, which decreases purchasing power. So yeah, when we look at like the purchasing power of Bitcoin on a long enough time frame, on a yearly basis, yeah, Bitcoin is higher than it was a year ago, I'd say, probably. Yeah, it's got to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah. But that's not always true, right? You could have bought Bitcoin in 2021, and then you could have been at the end of 22 or the beginning of 23 and being like, what the hell, I'm down 3x or 2x or something. So yeah, I think that that understanding how the macro affects crypto, I can just see a lot of crypto people getting this cycle wrong because they're blindly following this 4-year cycle theory that only has 3 data points and had strong macro the entire time. And if like if Trump is going to do what he wants to do, then part of making the economy healthier might be to be doing some brinksmanship with causing a recession just to stop the out of control spending. So
I I agree with you entirely, and it's tragic because sometimes ripping off a band-aid hurts, and sometimes,
yeah.
I think if Australia's no different. If I was in charge of Australia, our prime ministers have less control or power than your president, in comparison. We've decentralized our power even more so than in the United States, and it comes with pros and cons. But I think the con is that in Australia, the prime minister isn't really leading. An example I give quickly is we had a prime minister. We're resource rich. We have heaps of minerals and iron ore and uranium and gold and coal, and we're a massive land with very few people comparatively, and we've got lots of resources, and we sell most of our resources foreign. And we go, foreign nations come in, they dig it out of the ground, they give us some tiny little sprinkles of a reward, and they take all the profits offshore. We had a prime minister come in and said, "No, we want more profits for our stuff in our country," and within days he was sacked. He not through an
Wow.
election, but basically his own cabinet kicked him out. And that was, in my mind, a learning point for Australia that, yeah, it doesn't appear that the prime minister is in charge of this country, because when he says,
Wow.
and it wasn't a tax on the people, it was a tax on the super nations, sorry, the super companies. It was called the super tax. It was these huge mining companies that were making billions, potentially trillions of dollars off Australia. And he goes, can we have a few more crumbs out of what you're taking out of our ground? And he was sacked straight away.
Wow.
I'm also worried, and that's why on this channel, when I talk about politics, when I started talking about politics, at first I separated politics. I never spoke about it, but then I realized very quickly, you can't not talk about politics. If you are in financial markets, you must follow politics, whether you like it or not. You
Yeah.
must know what's happening on the macro. You have to track what governments are doing, your government or foreign governments, because it does affect what happens in the markets. And the tariffs is a good example. And what's surprising to me is that obviously everyone's following what happened with Zelensky and Trump and Vance yesterday in the White House. I shouldn't laugh, but man, that was like some good TV, even as Trump said. But
Right.
what was amazing to me is that in keeping all things consistent, that should have actually spooked the markets. Think about it. You're about to bring war to a close. You're about to do a peace agreement and a resource agreement, and you're about to sign that agreement. And that would give a lot of confidence to the market. Everyone would be like, yay, war's over. And America's like, yay, we've got access to lots of resources in the ground over there. But that didn't happen. What happened is basically Zelensky was kicked out of the White House. A deal wasn't made, is the main point. A deal was not made, and yet the markets rallied. And I like, shouldn't the markets have dumped when that happened? And it just makes me wonder, had a peace agreement been made, or at least the negotiation for, right, we're going to sign this deal, then we're going to bring Zelensky and Putin to the table, and then we'll have a ceasefire, and then we'll move on to no more killing. That, in my mind, would lead to a market rally. But of course, that didn't happen. Well, the rally happened. We can see that the market rallied beautifully yesterday after that big pullback. So I wonder, what will stimulate the market to go on a rally from here? In your mind, in the macro, what do we need for Bitcoin, thus the market, to go ballistic? What are we waiting for?
I mean,
Interest rate cut?
we need more certainty on like Doge, like where that money, whether it's going to create a recession from cutting waste, and then, I mean, we need, but even more important than that is inflation. It's all coming down to inflation, because inflation numbers are going to cause the Fed to like either raise or lower rates, and lowering rates, that's what's going to allow Bitcoin to run to new all-time highs.
Mm.
I think it's really hard to do it if the stock market is going down and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's what I'm really looking for is like, um, and we've already seen like, it can go away instantly, where Trump is like, oh, okay, well now that tariff isn't, is off again. So, um, so
What's
that's good to know. But
what's your
just,
biggest
yeah.
fear
Um,
in the
I
market?
don't. I mean, I don't have. My fear is that people are going that too many people are going to quit crypto because they got tricked on the 4-year cycle, and Bitcoin is going to go below 50K, and then people are going to quit and not come back. Um,
Mm.
Macro, I mean, I think the world is going to be just fine. But I think that, like you said with the Band-Aid, it's gonna hurt to take it off, and the rest of 2025 might not be glorious money making everywhere in the stock market and in crypto, um, like we would have predicted, like I would have predicted 6 months ago, following the 4-year cycle before, in my opinion, that might have broken. So, um, I have a list I can run through really quickly of 14 predictions that I made about Pulse Chain.
Absolutely.
And um s- I guess two of them already came true, but I wrote this here. I'll throw it up on the screen. Um, here we go. So um I wrote this, when did I wrote this on February 12th. So I wrote this like 2.5 weeks ago. And I said, here are 14 ways that the price of Pulse Chain tokens like Hex, Pulse, PulseX, and Ink could moon. Um, SEC case dismissed. Hey,
Check.
we just got that. Check. Pulse X single sided staking would be where you would get rewards, kind of like on Pancake Swap, where you lock up your Pulse X and now there's less Pulse X to sell. So that could make the price of all of these cryptos go up, because they're all linked with their interlocking liquidity. The OA had started to do staking with Hex. That also came true, where I predicted that the OA would keep staking Hex, which it did in the past 3 weeks. So that's partially come true. The origin address could run a bunch of validators to cause deflation in the Pulse coin supply. The sacrifice wallet could buy again. Actually, that one also came true, because there was a $15 million buy yesterday from the sacrifice funds into Pulse X only. And that's what we saw last year, January through March, when Pulse had that big run up. The origin address bought about $20 million over that entire period. And so that, I mean, that kind of tells you how crazy the sell pressure was yesterday. It would have been really embarrassing and sad if we got good news and then the price went down. But if the sacrifice wallet hadn't bought yesterday, people would be freaking. People would be losing their minds. Um, the incentive token inflation being lowered, that also happened since I predicted this. RH live streaming is on the list, or him doing more pre-recorded videos. A sacrifice for an RH wallet would, just like the last sacrifice did, it would cash, give people a kind of a way to cash out without cashing out, without hurting the price chart. And that would be something, you want something better than MetaMask for user interface. You want something like Phantom is for Solana. We need something for Ethereum and Pulse Chain that is just a really easy wallet to use. So that would be that's kind of like a double bullish thing there. There could be new farm pairs for earning incentive token. The origin address could like spend airdrops. That's kind of a minor point. We could get a centralized exchange listing. We could get limit orders on PulseX, which out of all these things might be not like bullish or bearish. It might just be kind of a neutral thing, but that's a feature that I want to see. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the show, there could be a way to swap using the PulseX website on Ethereum, and that could burn more PulseX while it's at it. And then Richard also said someday he will make a Space Rock NFT. So I have an example of that here. I know we don't have time to dig into all my crazy theories that I just put out there, but that's why people like me are still bullish on this. Last time Bitcoin topped in May, our first top that Richard called in 2021, and then Hex did its all-time high after that. And so if you think that Bitcoin already peaked for this cycle, which a lot of people don't think that, but then it's still possible that the all-time high for this cycle of hex impulsion could still be ahead of us. So
Do you think Bitcoin's peaked for this cycle, if there is a cycle?
I'm like 70% sure, yes, that Bitcoin
Be-
has already peaked
because of Trump?
because of the trade war
Yeah.
mostly, and because of the Fed like stopping their pivot.
If he announced a strategic reserve, though, do you think that would take you from your 70% guess to your 30% of it could pump?
Um, I I mean,
So if he
I
comes
want
out
to
tomorrow and he
say,
says,
yeah,
America's
yeah,
adopting Bitcoin as a
like
strategic
I,
reserve,
like
we're
I,
buying a
like I
million
want to
Bitcoin.
say, and like March 9th, hey, that'd be great. So I still own Bitcoin, even though I think it's already topped. I still own Bitcoin. So, I'm never like going to be looking at it as like, all or nothing, black or white. I hate fiat so much, even, even when I'm playing the 4 year cycle, I'm still going to have some Bitcoin. I'm still going to have some hex.
Yeah. Maddie, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I've only got to end because I'm going live on my channel in 20 minutes.
Right
Do
on.
you want to
Likewise.
shill your stuff?
Yeah.
Because
So
I
if
think
you
there's
want to
more
find
watching on my
like,
channel than on your channel. Sorry to yeah.
yeah, so people can find me at allmylinks.com/allin, or there's a decentralized version of that at mati.pls.fyi. And I'm Matty Allin on everything. The best place to catch me is Twitter and YouTube. How about
Excellent.
you?
For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Adam Stokes. Join me on the Adam Stokes channel, very originally named there. Follow me on X, Adam_Stokesy. Buy my book, 28 Pro Trader Tips, The Art of Trading, or a children's book, Clucky the Courageous Chicken. Both are available on Amazon. One's a financial book, one's a children's book, two totally different stories. Or finally, if you want to do anything crypto safely, head over to thecrypto.land, www.thecrypto.land. The site is being rebuilt at the moment, so if it's a little bit clunky, please forgive me, but it will look shiny soon. Maddie, closing words to you, my friend.
Yes, like thanks so much for streaming with me. I always enjoy talking crypto with you, Adam. You rock. Everybody should follow you and subscribe. I've got links in the description below. And looking forward to us being able to do another live stream here in the future before the end of the year here. Yeah, like congrats to everybody with the Hex thing for beating the SEC. That's a big deal.
Thanks, Maddie. Congratulations to all Hexicans. And you're my number one Hexican, the most level-headed out there. Even though there's many great Hexicans, you'll always be my number one. Thanks so much, Maddie.
I appreciate it. Well, great. So until next time, stake wisely, my friends, and peace out. Thanks. Thank you for the super chat, Ida. And Fast Abdul, thank you for the super chat. You guys rock.